In the early 1800s, thousands of enslaved people and their families fled north to escape the oppression of slavery. The Fugitive Slave Act made capturing escaped slaves a lucrative business for bounty hunters and made the journey a treacherous one, even for those willing to help and protect these families. A network of people, both African American and white, offered shelter and aid to the enslaved people during their travel, opening their private homes, churches, and schoolhouses, putting themselves at risk as well, because if they were ever caught harboring escaped slaves, the penalties were severe. This network of people and places became known as the Underground Railroad, and a portion of it passed right through Jacksonville, Illinois, with one of the most prominent stops being a small plot of land settled by Michael Huffaker just east of the city, known as Woodlawn Farm.
The Huffaker family was started in Germany in 1700. Michael Huffaker's great-grandfather was born then. In 1730, Michael's grandfather was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And in 1771, Michael's father was born in Virginia. Michael's father then moved on to eastern Kentucky, Wayne County, and Michael was born in 1800. 1822, Michael married Jane Bartleson, and in 23, he and Jane turned around and headed back up to Illinois to start a life. 1824, after buying 160 acres of land along the Movastar section of the creek, they came to Jacksonville, Illinois, which I shouldn't say Jacksonville, it was Morgan County. It was a little over a year later that Jacksonville was founded. There were no cabins or businesses or anything where Jacksonville was. He founded the farm in 1824 and built a log cabin 16 by 16. He also was very ambitious because 160 acres is a lot of land for a man, a wife, and a baby. The later part of the 1820s, Michael built 4 cabins to the north and west of his cabin and hired free black families. Michael's philosophy, per his family history, is that if you wanted to come and work, he didn't care if you were runaway slaves or if you were a free family. He knew that you were good workers. You were there. Anytime you wanted to leave, you could leave. By 1833, his wife was giving birth to their 7th child. Francis died in childbirth.
Understanding the hardships of that time, Michael being a single father now with 7 children, a big farm to run, who's going to take care of the children? And so he does have a lot on his plate. On one of his business trips to Carlinville, since he was a big farmer, he raised a lot of cattle. He went down there to do some business. While he was there, though, he met a young lady named Frances Jane Smith. He really became interested in Jane. She was kind of young at the time. She was only 19, but he was still very interested in her. He courted her and finally convinced her that to marry him. So he brought her back to the farm, drove up, and of course, all the children were so excited, Dad's home. So they come running out of the cabin, and Frances Jane is like, "And whose children are those?" "Well, they're my children," said Michael. And Jane is like, "There's 7 of them." "Yes, there's 7 children." "I'm not staying. I want to go back to my brother's house in Springfield now." He took her back to Springfield. Well, he really liked Frances Jane a lot. So it took him a little while, a few months, to convince Frances Jane to come back. He had to be a really smooth talker in order to get this very young lady of 19 to come back and become a mother of 7 children while working on the farm, while doing all the laundry, the cooking. Even though she had someone to help, she suddenly went from being a single lady to being a mother of 7 children and a wife. Well, as time went on, she decided that probably they would need a new home because they were starting to grow themselves.
In 1838 or 39-40, they built Woodlawn Farm, this brick house. Some of his family was here. His father had come up in 1831, and they all built houses. But Michael's was unique. The bricks from Michael's house came from the property on Woodlawn Farm. Sand from the creek, clay. He and the workers that lived on the farm built the house 3 bricks thick. There were no wall studs in the main frame of the house. It's plaster on brick, horsehair. The floor joists, it is not your traditional 2x4s or 2x8s or whatever. They are walnut logs. Some on the base of the house are larger in diameter than the ones in the roof and the ceilings. But they all were put in because 1, they were straight, 2, they were numerous and taken from the property, 3, they were long. So not only long, straight, and numerous, but the 4th one comes about is that walnut is not something that termites eat, so that was a bonus there. From the family records that we can see and indications of their understanding, he wasn't necessarily looking to be a underground railroad station. He was looking to be a farmer and successful, and he was. But it was sort of thrust upon him. As things happen, the opportunity was there, and he ended up saying, I've got to do this. This is the right thing to do. How many people came through as far as slaves moving north, we do not know.
You have to remember that back in the time when all of this was occurring, nobody talked about anything like this because you had huge fines that could be had. You also had slave catchers who were coming around looking for these black people who were slaves. And so it was an effort to always keep things quiet. Nothing was written down. Nothing was ever talked about. But one night, Fannie was hearing some noises, and Fannie was the daughter of Michael Huffaker. Fannie was a young lady at that time, probably 8 to 10 years of age, and she heard these noises and she heard a baby crying. Apparently it was people downstairs because she was upstairs in bed. And children in that era, when you went to bed, you were to stay in bed. You were not to get back up. You weren't to be wandering around. But being the young girl that she was, just like a lot of other young girls, she had to check it out. So she got up out of bed, came to the top of the stairs, and there were people downstairs. She recognized one fellow, Craig Hess, who was a friend of her father's. Then there was another black man who was there, and then a lady who was a mulatto at the time, and she was carrying a baby. The baby was crying, so it certainly attracted Fannie's interest. Children that age always want to know about babies. Because of the noise, Craig Hess said, let's go into the parlor, the room where we happen to be now, and that's where they actually did all their talking about what they were going to do to assist these people running away to the north to be freed. The next morning, Fannie, of course, was concerned about where was that baby. She was just interested in the baby. So she came downstairs, saw Mom, and says, where's the baby? And Mom says, oh no, Fannie, you cannot talk to anybody about it. Nobody should ever hear about this. You can't talk to your brothers and sisters, your friends, nobody. Fannie essentially did keep it all quiet. But a number of years later, after the Civil War, Fannie had a daughter who she named Fannie. One time she was in class and they were supposed to write essays about various things in their life or their history. Well, Fannie decided to write a story about what had happened to her mother, that her mother had seen these people with the baby coming into the house. So Fannie, as part of her school essay, wrote about that story. That was the first time that people acknowledged the fact there might have been an Underground Railroad site here on the Huffaker farm moving slaves to the north, because it was written down. It was a first-hand story, essentially from the granddaughter who had heard it from her mother.
That was pretty much how everybody sort of discovered after the fact of what was going on at Woodlawn Farm. Prior to that, we feel that there were slaves being moved through here We know that they were taken care of in the 4 black cabins that had been built for the workers that worked on the farm. And then they would move to the north to get away from the slave catchers. The reason that this was an area that there were slaves running through is because of St. Louis. It's a slave market that they had auctions and that down there. So they were trying to get away before they were sold. When the slave catchers would come to Jacksonville, they would have the authority, and then they had the authority because of the way it was set up in this country, to go into anybody's house and to look for slaves. And so they'd come to Jacksonville, and the first thing they'd ask is, where are your free blacks at? Jacksonville wasn't a total anti-slavery town. And they would say, well, they're over in, they called it Africa. And what it basically was is an area of several blocks that where free blacks lived in homes and that. So they would go into those homes looking for runaways, and they could go any place they wanted. Well, they would also tell them they said, well, the only other large contingency of blacks living here are out at Huffaker Farm, Woodlawn Farm. And the guy says, oh, and he says, but they've got cabins, they're free blacks. They've been working for Michael since the late 1820s. The advantage of the 4 cabins, as I said, was you could hide them in plain sight. You could hide the escaped slaves in plain sight. They would be able to come out in the evenings, sit around, relax, probably decompress, so to speak, because it's a ways coming up through the creeks and the bottomlands and stuff. I think that a situation like Woodlawn Farm was a little unique in that you probably could keep more people and move more people through this farm than you could, let's say, a home in Jacksonville, due to the fact of just being able to keep a secret. The farm itself was it probably was a godsend to these folks. They came in, they've been running for a week or so, whatever it took them to get from St. Louis area or Southern Illinois up, and they were pretty worn out, pretty tired, pretty hungry, and they get here and they've got people that are feeding them, taking care of them. They've got people that are black people that are free, that are talking to them, encouraging them, and I think that's unique, and I think that's something special for this area and the county. I think that there are other places out there that had that, but you don't know about it because it's something that you just didn't talk about. And Michael was one that not talk about anything anyway. He was pretty quiet and just did things the way he felt they should be done, and it was the right way, and that's what he did. And so I think that's where the uniqueness of this farm comes in.
I really feel that Michael and his family were so essential in the Underground Railroad movement, bringing the slaves from the South up to the North, simply because they believed that people should be free. They believed in the dignity of all people, not just white, but also black.
I think he was what you call a visionary, but he was a down-to-earth visionary. He was a realist. It just sort of was one of those deals that his reputation, his obituary in the paper was so, it was just really a touching thing to see how well respected this man, they called him a great pioneer in this area. How he was so well respected, even up into he died in 1883, and he was just a well-respected man. So even the people that were pro-slavery had really nothing to say bad about him, because he just he did his thing, and people never would have thought that he would have been a person that probably would have moved runaway slaves through his property. And he had the best way of doing it, out in the open, so to speak, and in his free blacks cabins. But he also had that understanding of fellow man, and it didn't matter if that man was white or black or brown.
Because they received help along the way from people such as Michael Huffaker and a couple of his friends and a few others here in the Jacksonville area, I think there was appreciation for both sides to respect each other and know that what they have done was appreciated and helped the world as a result.
It wasn't one of those things, and he wasn't one of those people that liked to say, here I am, and beat his chest on how good he was. He was so well respected as a pioneer in this area, and I think that's the story of Michael and the Huffakers. And he raised good children too, so I think that was his thing in life.
To find out more about Woodlawn Farm, visit our website at woodlawnfarm.com. Make plans to schedule a time to visit the home and enjoy a guided tour to learn more about the impact that it had on our region. You can also find out about our guided bus tour that happens a couple times a year and visits 9 different sites around the city of Jacksonville to see other homes and learn about the other people that were also part of the Underground Railroad network.